And on behalf of CBM, I would like to thank Glen Svensson for coming here today and leading this Shamatha retreat next 3 days. And Glen Svensson is a very talented teacher. He's been in Tibetan Buddhism for over 20 years and has completed the 7-year master program in advanced Buddhist studies of Sutra and Tantra. And we're very lucky. I'm always happy to see him here because all his teachings are very clear, very understandable. So thank you very much and welcome everyone.
Thank you, Tim. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Centre for Wisdom and Compassion, and welcome to this weekend Shamatha retreat. Just before we start, just a little bit of the logistics. In particular, we can look at the schedule for this weekend. So this evening we've got 2 hours, so we're going to break that into 2 sessions. So we'll have a little 15-minute tea break in the middle. Then tomorrow we're from 10 till 5, so we're going to have 5 sessions tomorrow. There'll be 2 sessions in the morning, each an hour long, with a little break in the middle, and so lunch will be 12:15 till 1:30. And then in the afternoon we'll have 3 sessions again, 1 hour long each, finishing with a little break in the middle and finishing at 5 o'clock. And then on Sunday we'll have 4 sessions, so same schedule in the morning, same lunchtime break, and then 2 sessions in the afternoon, finishing at 4 o'clock. So this is the schedule for the coming days. This is going to be a Shamatha retreat this weekend. Of course, Shamatha is about cultivating our attention skills, but in a Buddhist context, it's good to have that balanced with the compassion wing of practice. So we're going to introduce a little bit of balance in the weekend here. And so each session after lunch, tomorrow and Sunday, we're going to be looking at the compassion wing of practice. In particular, tomorrow, we're going to be looking at the loving kindness practice after lunch, and on Sunday after lunch, the compassion practice. Because also we find that these sorts of practices also provide sort of a lot of context and fuel for our attention training as well. So that's a little bit the structure, and each of the sessions we're going to be introducing the practice a little bit. We're going to be doing in a lot of the sessions 2 20-minute meditation sessions with a little bit of discussion in between, and there'll be plenty of opportunity to ask questions about any of the theory or any of the practice. And so we're going to be trying to do, in a lot of the sessions, 2 20-minute meditations, in some of them just 1 20-minute meditation, but quite a lot of meditation sessions in this weekend retreat. So that's a little bit the schedule for the weekend retreat. So the goal of this weekend retreat, of course, is to basically to learn the meditation techniques for the Shamatha practice, and then also learn on how to bring that into our daily life, to make use of it when we leave here. So this is really the goal for this weekend retreat, is simply to learn these practices and then how to bring them into our daily life to make use of them. So let's start by first off explaining a little bit this word shamatha. Now, shamatha is a Sanskrit word, and shamatha is a practice of developing our concentration skills, our attention skills. And the word shamatha itself we can actually divide it into 2 parts. The first part, shama, literally means to have a very calm mind, a mind that's not full of a lot of discursive thinking. And ta means to remain or abide. So often the word shamatha is translated into English as calm abiding. So any of you who have a little bit of exposure to Tibetan Buddhism, often you'll hear this word in English of calm abiding, to cultivate this concentration of calm abiding. So shamatha is a particular level of attention skill that we're trying to develop. And in the Buddhist spiritual path, this is the sort of minimum level of attention skills or concentration that we need to develop as a basis for other practices, such as the wisdom, vipassana practice, and so forth. Because this mind here is a very stable, clear, and focused mind. And this is the sort of mind that we need to really bring into our other practices so that we can really penetrate the nature of reality, that we can then fully develop the qualities of loving kindness and compassion. So this is really a key element, certainly within the Buddhist sphere. But also, of course, this practice is very beneficial for simply in daily life, because we need to have good attention skills in daily life. If we don't have good attention skills in daily life, then we're not very effective in anything we do. You know, we're just caught up in a lot of dullness and distraction. And unfortunately, in our modern society, particularly with a lot of the technology that we have, like smartphones and so forth, actually our attention skills seems to be going backwards, because we're constantly bombarded by stimulus and we're constantly finding ourselves getting caught up in distraction. And then, of course, we have a very hectic, fast-paced life, and then we end up getting very fatigued as well. So we also fall into the other extreme of being very dull. So we tend to oscillate between this sort of agitation, distraction, and dullness. And so if we are caught in these two modes, then we're not very effective in anything we do in our life. We're not effective at work, and that often leads to a lot of agitation and stress at work. We have a lot of mental imbalance. We get caught up in a lot of craving and agitation, aversion, and so forth. And also, we're often then tormented by our minds, because our minds tend to be very agitated, full of all sorts of thoughts and emotions, memories. We don't know how to deal with these things, and they often overwhelm us. So we also tend to be really the slaves of our mind. And then often, because of that, we end up with a lot of physical health problems, sleep problems. And so a lot of this comes down to the fact simply of not having good attention skills. So with this practice of shamatha, we'll be able to develop our attention skills. We'll be able to cultivate a very calm, clear, and focused mind. And if we have this calm, clear, focused mind, not only will we be more effective in everything we do, we'll have much better mental balance. You'll find you'll be much more calm and peaceful, much less agitated and stressed, much more efficient in everything we do, less physical problems, health problems, probably better sleep as well. So there are enormous benefits in daily life simply through doing this practice. But certainly from a Buddhist perspective, although these are some immediate daily life benefits, then there are much deeper benefits that we can gain through doing this practice. Because within the Buddhist training, we have three main core areas of practice. The first is ethics, to adopt an ethical lifestyle, simply to avoid harmful behavior. So this is not only the foundation of all Buddhist training, but I think it really is the foundation of any sort of meaningful life. And then the second core area of training is concentration. So this is where the shamatha practice fits in the Buddhist training, is as the concentration practice, to develop our attention skills, to really cultivate a very calm, clear, and focused mind. And that will bring a lot of direct benefits, but certainly from a Buddhist perspective, then that will be the foundation of the third area of practice, which is the wisdom practice, the wisdom of coming to realize the nature of reality. Because the Buddhist assertion is that it's our misunderstanding of the nature of reality that is actually at the root of all of our problems and suffering. And so that if we can come to realize the nature of reality, we can really overcome all of our mental afflictions and suffering. So this is the Buddhist assertion. But to be able to do this, to be able to come to directly realize the nature of reality, we need a very stable, calm, and clear mind. We need the mind of Shamatha. So Shamatha is really the basis of the wisdom practice, or sometimes this is called Vipassana practice. So also, together with the wisdom practice, we often find there's the balance of the compassion wing of practice, developing the positive qualities such as loving kindness and compassion and equanimity and so forth. So also, if we want to really cultivate these qualities in depth, then also it's very helpful to have a very stable, calm, clear, focused mind. So what we find is that the Shamatha practice is really the basis of all the other practices within the Buddhist context. So therefore, this Shamatha practice is essential also in the Buddhist sphere. So now let's have a look at how we go about training in this Shamatha practice. Now, when we talk about practice, then practice really has two parts to it. And often we find is when people want to engage in some sort of practice, they tend to do one or the other. They often don't tend to do both components, and therefore don't really get the benefit. So the first part of practice is the actual meditation session, this formal meditation setting, sitting down and engaging in that practice. So here in the Shamatha meditation, of course, we're sitting down and cultivating, developing our mindfulness, and really to develop that calm, clear, focused mind. But the other element of practice is then what we do for the rest of the day. Because if we sit down diligently every morning to meditate and we do our whatever practice, let's say Shamatha practice, we're developing a very calm, clear, focused mind. We're doing that every morning, but then we jump up and we run around the rest of the day as we normally do, full of agitation, hectic, stress. Then any little benefit that we've received in the morning will get squashed by our not very good behavior. And then sometimes people simply try to, for example, here in the Shamatha, we're trying to really develop our mindfulness skills. So some people don't bother with meditation, they simply try to be more mindful in daily life. But of course, this is very difficult to do because we have a very strong habit of not being mindful. So it really is a big struggle to try to develop those skills simply in daily life. Whereas if we add in a component of meditation where we're really developing those mindfulness meditation skills, then bring that into the day, then it's much easier to really work on it in daily life. And the more we work it on in daily life, the more that will feed back into our meditation practice. So therefore, in any practice we do, there are two essential ingredients: the actual meditation where we internalize, and then how we integrate that into our daily life. So also on this weekend retreat, of course, we're mainly focusing on the meditation practice, but also particularly tomorrow afternoon in the last session and Sunday, the last session, we're going to look at how to bring that into daily life so that we can get the most out of this practice, this Shamatha practice. So the daily life aspect, again, we're going to be looking at last session tomorrow and last session on Sunday. So let's now have a look at the actual meditation practice. So with the actual meditation practice, we can talk about two parts to that practice. There's what's called preparation, and then the actual practice. So again, here often people sort of don't really engage in preparation. Often what people do when they meditate, they just sit down and start meditating immediately. And then often things don't go very well because they're not prepared. They haven't prepared their body, they haven't prepared their mind. So they're not ready to engage in the meditation practice. It's a little bit like someone in athletics jumping into the race without warming up. You know, they're not really prepared, and then they injure themselves and it doesn't go so well. So similarly here, it's important to prepare ourselves well for meditation, so the actual meditation session can go much better. So with the actual preparation, we can look at three aspects of preparation. We can talk about preparing body, speech, and mind. So let's have a look at each of those aspects now. So in terms of preparing the body, then of course we're really talking about posture, how to prepare our body in terms of having a good posture. Because a good posture in meditation is important, because we want to have a posture in the body such that we can more or less forget about the body, that the body's not creating any problems in our meditation practice. Now, often in Buddhism, when they talk about posture, they give quite an extensive presentation of 7 points to look for. I think we'll keep it a bit simple and just focus on the main elements for this retreat. And effectively with posture, there are two core elements that are important. One, of course, is to keep the back nice and straight, because if we don't have the back straight and we're sort of hunched over like this, then of course there's a very high likelihood we're going to get sleepy and dull. And also at a deeper level, if the spine is not straight, you find that subtle energies in the body get sort of blocked, and that also creates some problems in meditation. So by keeping the back nice and straight, the subtle energies in our body can flow better, and also then we can avoid the problem of simply dullness by leaning over too much. So that's the one core element of posture, is to keep the back nice and straight. And then the other second important thing is to have the body completely relaxed, completely at ease. We want to be able to get into a situation where we basically can forget about the body. Now, to have a relaxed body, then a couple of things are very helpful. First, of course, is what to do with the legs. Within meditation in Buddhism, it's often said that the best posture with the legs is what's called the full lotus posture, where you have each foot up on the opposite thighs. I think for most of us, we're not that flexible, so that can be quite difficult. I mean, often if we're from a young age, we sit like that, then it becomes easy, but probably for many of us, very difficult. A variation of that is to do half lotus, where you have one foot up on the other one and the other one underneath. Even that, for many people, is quite difficult. And so many people end up sitting cross-legged. Now, sitting cross-legged is fine, but often we're very stiff in the hips and knees and so forth. And so, and this was my case when I started meditating. So I started sitting cross-legged, and I ended up sort of sitting here like this. And then I had a lot of lower back pain and pain in the groin. And I thought, well, what's going on? And the problem was, of course, I was so stiff that, you know, it put a lot of pressure on my lower back and so forth. So if we're very stiff in the hips and lower back, then it's important to sit on enough cushions so that your knees are at least level with your hips, ideally the knees touching. So you have 3 points of contact, very stable. So also, if we don't sit on enough cushions and we're quite stiff in the hip area, often what we find is we're constantly doing this, straightening our back in meditation, and also we end up with a lot of lower back pain. So if we're finding that, generally it's a sign we're not sitting on enough cushions. add more cushions so that you naturally have the back straight and the knees are at least level with the hips, if not touching the cushions. Some people find that sitting cross-legged, the circulation cuts off and the leg goes numb. So with that, often people just play with a bit how they're cross-legged, and somehow they find a position where that doesn't happen. Another possibility, if you find that that's happening and find it uncomfortable, is you can adopt what's called the Burmese posture, which is instead of crossing the legs, you have one leg in front of the other. So you can simply sit with one leg in front of the other, then you don't have the problem of cutting circulation. So you might like to try that. Some people, of course, have knee problems, can't even sit cross-legged. Then, by all means, sit in a chair. It's fine. Keep the back straight, feet flat on the floor. Some people even have back problems and find sitting in a chair is very painful. Then another option is to simply lie down, flat on your back, in what's called the Shavasana, the corpse posture. In fact, we're going to be using that posture at the end of this evening's session, because it's a very good posture for meditation, particularly if you have back problems, particularly if you want to do some meditation in the evening after a busy day, but your body is quite fatigued and it's quite tiring to sit upright. So then you can use that posture. And also it's very good to use as a transition to go into sleep. So I'll talk a little bit more about that posture later this evening. Personally, I like that posture a lot. When I'm in retreat, I tend to use that posture quite a lot, particularly at the end of the day when, sitting a bit and knees starting to hurt a little bit. Use that posture, very relaxed, very calm. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that in the second half of this evening's session. Then, of course, the eyes, what to do with the eyes. Now, the general recommendation for meditation is to have the eyes slightly open, because if we have the eyes closed, then generally that's sort of a sign to go to sleep and we get very drowsy. And if we have the eyes too far open, maybe too much light, get agitated. So the general recommendation is to have them slightly open. As a beginner, then we can play with that a little bit. If we're the sort of person that gets very much agitated very easily, you may find that even having them slightly open, you're still very agitated. Then you can have them lightly closed. If you're the sort of person that gets very easily very drowsy and dull, probably not a good idea to have the eyes closed. Then I would really recommend to have them at least slightly open. And then, of course, with that, you can adjust the position of the head so that if your eyes are open and you're too elevated view, you may get agitated, and if it's too low, you may get dull. So you can also not only adjust the amount the eyes are open, but you can adjust the angle of the head as well. That can be something you can play with to help with overcoming either agitation or dullness. Within the Shamatha practice, particularly the practices that we're going to be doing on Sunday, it's very much recommended to have the eyes open. So there we're really going to be working with the eyes open on the Sunday. But for this evening and tomorrow, then just play with what works best for you in terms of the eyes. Then the hands, what to do with the hands. You'll find that in the Tibetan tradition, the one posture with the hands that's usually recommended is what's called the meditative posture of meditative equipoise, where you rest your right hand in the left and the thumbs touching, resting them in your lap. And that is symbolizing the two aspects of practice of wisdom and compassion, wisdom the left, compassion the right, and the thumbs touching is we're integrating those two aspects of practice. So that's generally the one that is taught. If you find that uncomfortable or you're used to some other position with your hands, that's fine as well. You just put the hands on the knees, whatever's really comfortable is the thing to do with the hands. So that's a little bit about the posture. Does anyone have any questions about posture? Because shortly we're going to go into a meditation session.
I have two questions.
Sure.
About the hands.
Sure.
Firstly is that the left is in fact holding the right. So the wisdom, now I understand it's the wisdom aspect, which is, yes, comforting, holding the the right?
Yes, you
Because
could.
it could be the other way around.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, sure. But I mean, this is I mean, of course, they're integrated. Wisdom supports compassion, compassion supports wisdom. But of course, from the Buddhist perspective, the reason we're sort of stuck in this state of existence is due to lack of wisdom. That's what's going to liberate us. So that's really the antidote. So this is the key element. And then, but that of course needs also for the compassion to be fully developed, it needs to be resting in wisdom as well. But of course, you could equally have this opposite argument. So I think it's not sort of critical. In fact, I think in some traditions, I see them using the hands the other way. So it's not like, oh, you've got the right and the left and the right, oh, that's wrong. You know, it's not like that.
So energetically, there is a difference, and in terms of masculine, feminine.
Yeah.
There's a difference. It's actually not just.
Yeah. I mean, with all the posture, if you look at the posture from the perspective of Vajrayana Tantra, every little aspect of the posture has some impact on subtle energies. But of course, at our level of practice, then we have much more heavy things to worry about but certainly when we go to that level of practice, then you'll find the explanations for each of the aspects of posture has some positive effect on subtle energies in some way.
Yeah, and that focuses our attention to our intention by the use of mudras.
Sorry, the what?
The use of mudras, the use of hand positions, fingers, and positions. By using a mudra, a classic formation,
sure,
then that's directing our intention to what we're trying to actually harness or.
Yeah, I mean, this is the mudra of meditative equipoise, and that's what we're effectively trying to achieve in this shamatha practice, is to develop that balanced, clear mind. So yes, if we can, and of course the symbolism of wisdom and compassion, and we need to cultivate them in a joined way as well. So of course, in particularly Tibetan Buddhism, all, not just mudras, but images and statues and tankas, they all have symbolism. And so we can use this external symbolism and mudras to remind us of what we're trying to achieve. So this is also very, very helpful. Okay. So therefore, in terms of preparation, preparing the body, we talked about the posture. Preparing speech here, speech is really talking about our internal chit-chat. So there's a couple of things we can do here to prepare our mind. And particularly what we prepare the speech, is that often you'll find in a number of traditions, in the beginning of a meditation, they'll ask you to do some sort of little breathing exercise. In the Tibetan tradition, often this is presented in a very elaborate way called the 9-round breathing exercise. And often that's used together with quite elaborate visualizations and blocking nostrils and so forth. Some traditions talk about simply counting 21 breaths. And some traditions talk about simply taking 3 deep breaths. Now, the main purpose of these various breathing exercises is the same, and the main purpose is to let go of any negative state of mind that we may have coming into meditation. Because if we come into meditation with a little bit of an agitation, negative state of mind, then it's very difficult to bring that into a positive state of mind. So the main purpose of this breathing exercise is, in particular, if we come into meditation with a bit of agitation and negativity in our mind, to simply focus on a simple breathing exercise. And by doing that, we can let go of any negativity and bring the mind into a more neutral state. And then from that state, we can then develop a positive motivation. So therefore, often a little breathing exercise is a good thing to do at the start of a meditation. And then, of course, with the breathing, particularly in the shamatha practice here, to let the breath flow naturally, to simply let the breath do whatever it does, and not to manipulate the breath. We're not, in this practice of shamatha, we're not trying to make the breath rhythmic, we're not trying to make it subtle, we're not trying to make it deep, we're not trying to do anything with it. We're simply allowing it to do its own thing. Of course, there are other practices where we do breath manipulation work and they have their own purpose. But here in Shamatha practice, we're simply letting the breath flow naturally. And then in terms of preparing the mind, then of course setting a positive motivation for the meditation. And then also here with the Shamatha practice is really to bring the mind into the present moment. Because often we find that our mind is not in the present moment. In fact, most of the time our mind is in the past or the future. So it's very helpful at the beginning of this Shamatha practice to really let go of any going into the past and the future and allow the mind to rest into the present moment. So this also is a part of preparing the mind. So through doing these preparation of body, speech and mind, then we're in a very good state to start the actual meditation session. So here then, in terms of actual meditation session, what are we to do in the actual meditation session? So here, of course, we're talking about the Shamatha practice. So we're going to talk about a number of aspects here of the actual meditation session for the Shamatha practice. The first point we're going to be looking at right now, in fact, is what qualities are we trying to cultivate in this Shamatha practice? And then we're going to look at what object should we use in this practice? Because here in the Shamatha practice, we're developing our attention skills by focusing on a given object. But what object to focus on? And so there are, of course, a number of options here, and we're going to be looking at that shortly. And then, of course, also we're going to be looking at what tools are we going to use in this practice? What are the main tools we use in this practice? And then lastly, we're going to look at what faults do we need to overcome? We're going to look at the various faults that can come up in this practice and how to overcome the faults of practice. So these are some of the elements that we're going to be looking at in terms of the actual Shamatha meditation. So we'll begin now by looking at qualities. What qualities are we trying to cultivate in this Shamatha practice? Now, traditionally here in the Shamatha practice, in the meditation texts, they describe two qualities that we're trying to cultivate in the Shamatha practice. The first quality is the quality of stability, meaning a stable mind. So we're trying to cultivate a stable mind, a mind that can focus on a given object without becoming distracted. So of course the fault that we're trying to overcome here in developing a stable mind is distraction. And in the meditation text, often this fault of distraction is listed as excitement. Because this is the most common form of distraction. We get distracted by something exciting, something interesting. Not only are we trying to cultivate a stable mind in the Shamatha practice, but we're also trying to cultivate a clear mind, to be able to focus on any given object in a very clear way. So the second quality we're trying to cultivate in Shamatha is clarity, a very clear mind. So therefore, the fault that we're trying to overcome to cultivate a clear mind, of course, is dullness. And often the technical word in the text for that is laxity. So these are the two qualities we're trying to cultivate in the shamatha practice. But I like to add a third quality that's not normally mentioned in the meditation texts, but I think for most of us in our modern society, it's very important to pay attention to this quality. And often we don't, and we end up in a lot of difficulty in our meditation practice. And that is the quality of relaxation. Now, probably the reason it wasn't mentioned in the old meditation texts is hundreds of years ago, I think generally people were quite relaxed. In fact, often too relaxed. So often you'll find in the shamatha practice, one of the very first instructions that you see in meditation texts on the shamatha practice, it says, firmly tighten your focus on the object. And that was probably needed for people in those days because they're too relaxed. But unfortunately, in our modern day world, we don't tend to be very relaxed. We often have a lot of tension, that we lead very fast-paced lives. We're bombarded by stimulus. We get very agitated, very tense, very hectic lifestyles. So this is our natural mode. And because our minds are so chaotic, then generally in our daily life, when we need to focus on anything, what do? We tense even more, because we notice if we don't tense when we focus, we're going to get distracted. So that's our normal way of focusing in daily life, with tension. And if we only have to focus on something for a very short time, that could sort of work. But we know from our own experience, if we focus on something with tension for a longer period of time, we become completely exhausted and often become very agitated. So this is not the approach we want to use here in the shamatha. So we have to really retrain ourselves that in daily life, we tend to be oscillating from when we're alert, we tend to be very tense. And when we're relaxed, we tend to be quite dull. So we need to combine the relaxed part with the alert part. So what we're trying to do here in the shamatha is to be alert, but at the same time completely relaxed. So that's something probably quite new for us. We never really tend to be very relaxed when we're alert. We tend to be very tense. So in fact, what many people find as beginners in meditation is that the main difficulty they find in meditation is this. Simply, we're too tight, we're too tense, we're trying too hard. And then even people start complaining that meditation gives them headaches. You know, oh, I'm meditating, I get headaches, like that meditation doesn't work. And it's simply because we're too tight, we're too tense, we're trying too hard. So here in the shamatha practice, we need to really cultivate these qualities in this order. So as a beginner, the very first thing we really need to focus on in this practice, and in fact all meditation practice, is to really relax. Have a relaxed body and a relaxed mind. Because without a relaxed body and mind, we're not going to be able to develop these qualities in any long-term way. So first emphasizing relaxation, and then on the basis of a relaxed body and mind, we can work on stabilizing our mind. And then on the basis of a more stable mind, we can work on improving our clarity of attention. So this is the order that we really need to emphasize these qualities in the shamatha practice. Any questions about any of this? Okay, so what we're going to do now before we go for a break is we're going to do a short shamatha practice. And in particular in this meditation, I'd like to emphasize the preparation aspect. So therefore, to make sure we have a good physical posture, we'll do a little breathing exercise to settle the speech. We'll prepare the mind well. And then we're going to emphasize in the shamatha practice the first quality of relaxation. So we're really going to be just emphasizing the relaxation aspect. Okay. So finding yourself a nice, comfortable posture. So with the posture, the two important points is to keep the back nice and straight and allow the entire body to become completely relaxed, completely at ease. So simply allow your awareness to descend into the body. Simply become aware of sensations throughout the body. And if you notice any area of tightness or tension in any part of the body, then use the out breath to relax and release that tightness or tension as best you can. And then bring your awareness to the area of your face. And soften and relax all the muscles in the face. The mouth and the jaw soft and relaxed. And all the muscles around the eyes soft and relaxed. In this way, allowing the entire body to become completely relaxed, completely at ease. And then we can take 3 slow, deep breaths, maintaining awareness of sensations of the breath as you take these 3 breaths. And then simply allow the breathing to settle into its natural rhythm. Not trying to control or regulate the breath in any way. Simply allowing it to flow naturally and effortlessly. And relaxing more deeply with every out-breath. And then give yourself permission to let go of any hopes or fears, worries or concerns about the past or the future for the duration of this short meditation. Letting go of all of these things and simply allowing the mind to come to rest in the present moment. And simply focus on the sensations of the breath throughout the body, wherever you can most easily notice any sensations associated with the breathing. And maintaining an ongoing flow of mindfulness of the sensations of the breath throughout the body. And if you find that you've become distracted, then there's no need to become upset. Simply be happy that you've noticed that you've become distracted. And the very first thing to do is simply relax. And then release the distraction and very gently return to focusing on the breath. So relax, release, and return. Every time you notice that you've become distracted. Or if you notice that you've become dull or spaced out, then use the in-breath as an opportunity to arouse and refresh your focus on the breath. We can slowly bring this meditation to a close. Does anyone have any questions about anything we've covered so far before we take a short tea break? Okay, let's take a tea break, 15-minute tea break. So let's just begin by reviewing a few of the points that we've covered already before we move on. So this weekend, of course, we're doing Shamatha retreat. Shamatha is a Sanskrit word which literally means calm abiding. It's the practice of developing a calm, clear, focused mind. It's developing our attention skills. And it's the level of attention that we are trying to cultivate in the Buddhist spiritual path to be a basis for our other practices, such as our wisdom practice, our vipassana practice, and so forth. And simply by cultivating this calm, clear, focused mind, of course, we have a lot of immediate benefits in daily life as well. You know, our mind will be more calm, clear, focused, will be much more effective in everything we do, much less stress, also much better mental balance. Also probably find that we have better health benefits, probably better sleep and so forth. And here in this shamatha practice, we saw that the practice has two parts, meditation and daily life. In fact, all practices have two parts. Meditation, where you're trying to internalize the practice, and daily life, where you're trying to integrate it into daily life. So we're going to be looking at how to integrate this shamatha practice into daily life, particularly in the last session tomorrow and the last session on Sunday. And then the other times we're going to be just looking at the actual meditation practice. Now, in the actual meditation practice, we saw that in the actual meditation, there are two parts. There's the preparation and the actual meditation. And in the actual preparation, we looked at preparing body, speech, mind. Particularly, we looked at the body to set up a good posture. It's important to have a good posture so that we can really forget about our body, that our body doesn't create any disturbances in our meditation. Not only are we looking to have the back straight and the body relaxed, but I think it's also very helpful that during the meditation to try and keep the body as still as possible. Because we have this habit now, as soon as there's some little itch or scratch in the body, we instantly move and scratch and itch and so forth. So if we keep doing this in meditation, of course, this is a distraction. So try to really keep the body as still as possible, as well as having the good posture. And that'll really avoid having the body creating problems or distractions in our meditation. And then in terms of preparing the mind, we talked a little bit about not just having a good motivation, but we talked about sort of bringing the mind into the present moment. Because we tend to live in the past and in the future. And with meditation, particularly with this, it's very important to let go of any sorts of expectations. Because often we come into pretty well everything we do in our life with some sort of expectation, hoping to achieve something, worrying about not achieving something. So we tend to always come into things with all sorts of expectations. And here in meditation, expectations really just create a lot of obstacles, unnecessary obstacles in our practice. So if you notice that there are any sort of expectations when you come into meditation, really just let go of them or instantly. Let go of any sorts of expectations, because they're just going to create problems. Of course, in any given practice, we need to know how to do the practice. We need to know the goal of the practice, but then let go of any expectations in the actual meditation session, and it'll go a lot better. Because often people come in with this sort of expectation that, you know, my practice should be as good as it was yesterday or last week. If not, it should be actually a little bit better. So of course, this is not the reality of meditation practice. It's not like every day we're slightly improving. If we have this expectation, we're just going to set ourselves up with a lot of frustration. So I can't overemphasize is just let go of any sorts of expectations coming into meditation. And then in the actual meditation session, we've began to look in the shamatha practice that the qualities that we're trying to cultivate in this practice. And the first quality that's not often mentioned is this quality of relaxation. So again, I can't overemphasize this quality enough in this practice and in all meditation practices, is really initially to really emphasize simply relaxing the body and relaxing the mind. The more that you can relax the body and relax the mind, the better basis you have for effectively developing a stable and clear mind. Because you're not going to be able to effectively develop stability and clarity with a lot of tension in the mind. It simply won't work. So really in the initial stages, just really emphasize this relaxation, relaxation, relaxation. But of course, not in the way we normally relax now. Normally when we relax now, we become half asleep. So the key here is to really deeply relax, but still maintain whatever level of clarity we have without it dropping into dullness. So that's the challenge here. So what we're going to do now is have a look at objects. What sort of objects should we use for this practice? So in this practice of shamatha, of course, we're simply trying to maintain our focus on a given object. But the question is, of course, what object should we use in this practice? And in the meditation text, a number of different objects are listed. And the general recommendation with this practice is use the object that works best for you. What I'm going to do now and what we're going to be focusing over this weekend is we're going to be focusing on three particular objects. Three objects that I think are very helpful and beneficial, particularly for us in our modern day society. The first object is the breath, and the breath, the physical sensations of the breath. And this is the object that's probably most widely emphasized in most Buddhist traditions as the object for the shamatha practice. And also the meditation texts usually go to say that if you're the sort of person who is highly discursive, meaning always thinking, then definitely the best object for you is the breath. And I think this probably accounts for about 90% of the modern day population. We're all living in the head. We're always thinking. So much so that we've often lose touch with the physical reality, particularly our body, because we're all living in the head. So this is not a good thing. And most of our conceptual thinking, unfortunately, is about the past and the future. Very rarely are we actually in the present moment. So by focusing on the physical sensations of the breath, not only does it get us out of our conceptual mind and into the body, so this is a good start, but the physical sensations of breath, of course, only happen in the present moment. So by focusing on them, it gets us out of the past and the future into the present moment. And certainly from a Buddhist perspective, when you live in the past and the future, that's a source of a lot of unhappiness. And even a few modern studies now are showing the same result, that by living in the past and the future, we generate a lot of unnecessary unhappiness with respect to that. So again, the breath is probably, for most of us as beginners, is probably going to be the best object to use for this practice. And within the breath object for the shamatha practice, we have three variations of this practice. The first is what's called the full body approach, and this is a little bit what we did in the last meditation. So in this one, we're simply noticing sensations of the breath anywhere in the body that related to the breathing. So that could be the movement of the abdomen, the stomach, chest area, throat, in the mouth, nostril area, anywhere you notice any sensations associated with the breathing. So this is a very diffuse object. And by focusing on this in a very diffuse way, this can be very helpful for emphasizing relaxation, to do the full body exercise. The second variation of the breath practice that we're going to start to look at tomorrow morning is to focus in the area of the abdomen, the rising and lowering of the abdomen as you breathe. This is much emphasized in many Buddhist traditions, particularly the Theravada traditions, tend to emphasize focusing in the area of the abdomen. Again, this is a very easy object of focus. So this can be very helpful for stabilizing our attention. And then the third variation that we're going to look at, particularly tomorrow afternoon, is to focus at the entrance of the nostrils. So here we're focusing on a very small area here at the entrance of the nostrils. It's a very much smaller object, much more subtle object. And because of that, this can be very helpful for improving the clarity of our attention. So each of these three variations of the breath practice is very suited to developing each one of those qualities of relaxation, stability, clarity. That, of course, doesn't mean that we have to start here to work with relaxation, then we have to move to the abdomen. It's just that each one of those is particularly suited for each one of those qualities. So we're going to be working with the breath tomorrow, and this is probably going to be the object that most of you would use as the best object for this shamatha practice. And it's the one that's probably most widely emphasized in Buddhist traditions. But then on Sunday, we're going to work with two other objects that I think also emphasized in a number of Buddhist traditions, and also I think particularly useful for us in our modern society. And the second object is to focus on the mind itself. And so here in this practice, we are simply observing our own mind, meaning observing our mind and whatever is arising in the mind. So we're simply observing thoughts and emotions and memories and so forth as they arise in our mind. Now, many people find this very challenging because two reasons. One, the mind is a more subtle object. It's not some physical, tangible object, more subtle object. And secondly, we don't tend to have the habit of observing our mind. Because what happens now, of course, is when something comes up in our mind, like a thought, an emotion or memory, what do? We automatically identify with it, we follow it, we get caught up in our stories. And sometimes the things that come up in our mind are not very pleasant, and we often don't know how to deal with it. So our automatic response often is just to try and suppress them. So that's our automatic response now, is that we either tend to immediately identify and follow our thoughts and emotions, memories, or we try and suppress them. And because of that, we really tend to be the slaves of our mind. We're often tormented by our mind. We're often dominated by our mind. So this practice, not only is it a practice to develop a calm, clear, focused mind, but also it really enables us to become the masters of our mind instead of the slaves of our mind. Because our mind can be our worst enemy or our best friend. Now, for many of us, it's our worst enemy, and we're often tormented by our own mind. However, in this practice here, we are simply learning to become the observer or witness of our own mind, just stepping back and observing whatever's coming up in our mind. Learning to simply observe thoughts, emotions, and memories as they arise and pass, arise and pass. And if we can do that, then what you will find is that every time you simply observe these mental events arise and pass, the habit of these things coming up will get weaker and weaker. So our mind will naturally become more quiet and still. Now, of course, we want to make our mind quiet and still, so we try and force our mind to be quiet and still. It doesn't work, because when we try to do that, it just gets more agitated and more stuff. So we don't have to fight with our mind. We simply step back and observe. And if we can do that, these thoughts, emotions, and memories actually have no power over us. Because actually, if you look at what is a thought, emotion, or memory, it's virtually nothing. It has no power in itself to do anything to us. It only has power if we give it power. And we give these things power by either identifying with them and following them or trying to suppress them. If we simply step back and observe, then they can't do anything to harm us. So not only will our mind naturally become more quiet and still with this practice, but also being able to sit back and observe, it means that even if some strong mental event, if that were to arise in our mind, we could simply be present with it without it overwhelming us. So actually we'll become the masters of our mind with this practice. So this practice, I think, can bring us enormous benefits in our modern world, because again, many of us, I think, are tormented by our own mind. Many people find this challenging, but we're going to be practicing this on Sunday, and it really can bring enormous benefits. And even though we find it difficult, we can follow the advice. Many people find this quite difficult. It's not because it's complicated. It's not complicated to look at our own mind. It's not a complicated practice. It's not like we have to do some elaborate visualization and complex procedure. All we got to do is just observe. That's it. Just observe. And so therefore we can follow the advice from the great Indian master Shantideva, who says, no matter how difficult something seems, everything with practice becomes easy. And that's all it is in this practice. It's not like we have to learn some complicated technique. All we have to do is learn to observe the mind. Just sit and observe. And if we get in the habit of doing that, then it'll become easy to do that. And we really will become the masters of our mind. So we're going to be looking at that practice on Sunday, particularly in the morning. And then we're going to look at another one that's closely related to this practice. And that is actually what's sometimes referred to as shamatha with no object, or sometimes it's called awareness of awareness. So in this practice, also many people tend to find this quite difficult, but again, not because it's complicated. In fact, this practice of no object is actually so simple, because we're really effectively doing nothing. So we're not doing anything complicated. We're not even really doing anything. But people find it difficult because we're not in the habit of ever being, because this practice is more about being than doing. We're always in the habit of doing something. We want to do something. So when this practice is explained, people go, but what should I do? What am I supposed to do? And it's difficult to explain because it's not about doing, it's about being. In this practice, it's simply being aware of being aware. That's it. Implicitly now, when we're aware of something, like when we're aware of this cup, we're aware of this cup explicitly, and implicitly we're aware of being aware of the cup. All we're doing is making that explicit. We're simply becoming aware of being aware. That's all. That's it. It's so simple. But that's why people find it difficult, because it's so simple, because we're not used to just being. So we're going to be looking at this practice on Sunday afternoon. And the big advantage with this practice, there are a number of big advantages with this practice. One is that it gets us into the habit of simply being present without having to do all the time. So that's a good start. And also by simply being present, being aware of being aware, that experience of awareness is an experience of stillness and spaciousness. And if we can rest in that experience of stillness and spaciousness and get used to that, then in our busy, hectic lives, we can still maintain that state. We can maintain that state of being in a state of stillness and spaciousness in the midst of all these appearances, instead of getting caught up in the appearances. So that's another huge benefit. We can maintain that open, spacious, still state in the midst of a busy life. And the third benefit with this practice is that by resting in awareness, of simply being aware of being aware, we're really starting to get very close to understanding our mind, the nature of our mind. And so it's not uncommon that by simply resting in awareness, we can have an intuitive experience of the nature of our mind. And so this is an experience of the nature of reality. And so from a Buddhist perspective, if we can really come to realize the nature of our mind, we can overcome all of our mental afflictions and suffering. So this practice leads us into the Vipassana or wisdom practice very well as well. So this can bring enormous benefit. So we're going to be looking at that on Sunday afternoon. So these are three objects that we're going to be focusing on in this Shamatha retreat. And I think each one of those can bring enormous benefits to us, particularly in our modern society. Anyone have any questions about any of those practices? We're going to be looking at, of course, each one in more detail over the weekend.
Just about the concepts, because I always thought and was taught that samatha it's about the breath, and then vipassana is about observing the mind and the awareness. And now you're putting all these three under samatha.
Right.
So then I'm questioning, how do you define vipassana?
Right, okay. So remember, shamatha, the goal of shamatha is to develop a relaxed, stable and clear mind. Effectively, we're developing our attention skills, our ability to focus on a given object in a stable and clear way. So that object of focus can be any one of many things. So in this practice, we're either observing the breath, we're observing the mind, or we're resting in awareness. Or we could even, sometimes they say as a beginner, if we're very agitated and we can't even observe the breath, they say, pick a stick or a pebble, put it in front of you and just look at it. This is a very coarse object. You'd need to go further, but there can be any one of many objects. So the goal is just to observe the object. Vipassana practice, as the name suggests, is insight practice. So Vipassana practice is about gaining insight into reality. And we can gain insight into reality by, again, focusing on we can focus on the breath, the mind, we can focus on the pen, the person, we can focus on anything. But in the Vipassana practice, we are not simply developing attention skill on the object. We are investigating that object of focus. What, various characteristics like the transient nature of it, does it exist independently and so forth. So for it to become a Vipassana practice, it involves some sort of investigation of the object. So here, and the mind, we're not investigating, we're simply observing. But because we're simply observing, then intuitively we can come to some understanding about the nature of the mind. But for it to be a real Vipassana practice, it would involve investigating that awareness, where is it located, things like this. So that here there can be a fine line between it, but the line is, are we simply observing the object, or are we in some way investigating that object? If we start to investigate the object in whatever way, then it's a Vipassana practice. So what's important is to not mix the two. It's not to sit down in a shamatha practice and then start investigating and then not and this. So we should do shamatha when we're doing shamatha and do vipassana when we're doing vipassana. So we should at the start of the meditation go, okay, this meditation is vipassana, so I'm going to not just observe my mind, I'm going to question my mind or question awareness or investigate so that's the sort of it's what we're doing with the object determines whether it's shamatha or vipassana. If we're simply observing the object, shamatha. If we're investigating it in some way, vipassana.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. So that's what we're going to be looking at in the tomorrow and Sunday. Now, one more thing before we do our final meditation this evening, and that is, what tools are we using in this practice? And there are basically two main tools we use in this practice of shamatha. And the first is mindfulness. Of course, mindfulness is a very popular thing these days. The word mindfulness is coming from the original Sanskrit word was smrti, and the Pali word is sati. And both smrti and sati literally mean to remember. So mindfulness is our ability to remember the object, i.e. not to forget the object. So mindfulness is simply defined as our ability to focus on an object without becoming distracted, to remember the object. So this is mindfulness. But then, of course, we need a second tool. We need the tool of introspection. Introspection is like quality control. So introspection's job is to monitor the mindfulness. How is our mindfulness going? Are we still on the object, or are we becoming distracted or dull? So introspection's job is quality control, is to notice when we're becoming dull or distracted, and then reapply mindfulness, hold the object again. So these are the two main tools we're using in the shamatha practice. Now, of course, mindfulness is a very popular thing these days, and that's a good thing. But what we need to be aware of is that how this word mindfulness now is used in a lot of the modern day mindfulness movements is a little bit different than how mindfulness was originally used in Buddhism. Because in a lot of the modern traditions, the word mindfulness is often described or defined as something like a non-judgmental awareness of whatever is arising in the present moment. That's often how it's presented. Nothing wrong with that. That's great, to have a non-judgmental awareness of whatever is arising in the present moment. But this is not really how the word mindfulness was originally defined in Buddhism. Again, mindfulness in Buddhism is simply our ability to hold the object, to remember the object. So we need to be a little bit aware of that difference in the way the word mindfulness is used. Otherwise, we can get some confusion. So these are the two tools we use in the shamatha practice. The primary tool, of course, is mindfulness. And the more that we really develop mindfulness, our ability to hold the object without becoming distracted, the more our ability to introspect or quality control will improve as well. So these are the two tools. Any questions about the tools? Okay. What we're going to do now to finish this evening is another meditation. And what I'd like to do now is to practice this meditation using the corpse posture, the Shavasana posture. And I'll just give a few bits of explanation before we do that. The corpse posture, of course, the Shavasana posture is simply lying flat on your back, feet a little bit apart, your hands a bit away from the body, the palms facing upwards. And this can be a very good meditation posture for a number of reasons. For a number of cases. One is, of course, if we have some back problems and we find sitting like this or even in a chair is very much painful on the back, then just simply lying down. Another occasion where it can be helpful is if we are doing, say, a meditation retreat and we're sitting for many hours a day. Maybe by the end of the day we're quite fatigued or the knees are starting to hurt a little bit, then we can use the Shavasana posture. Or maybe we're having a busy life, hectic work life, and we'd like to meditate in the evening, but we come home, we're quite physically fatigued from work. We'd like to meditate, but we can't really sit in an upright posture. Then we can lie down. So these are all occasions where, or if we're sick, maybe normally we sit like this, but we've got some illness and we feel physically drained or something. So if we have some illness or sickness, then also, or some injury, then we can lie down in the bed, lie down flat on the floor or in the bed. So these are all occasions where the corpse posture can be a very good posture. Also, another occasion where we can really use this corpse posture, where I highly recommend, is to use it as a transition to sleep. Meaning that at the end of the day, when you go to bed, lie down in bed in the corpse posture, the Shavasana, flat on the back, hands to the side, and then simply engage in a little Shamatha practice, particularly focusing on the sensations of the breath anywhere in the body, emphasizing relaxation. So this can be a very good way to wind down from the day. Maybe you've had a busy day and your mind's a bit agitated, your body's tense. So this can be a good way to unwind from the day, to release any tension in the body and the mind, to relax. It's a mindfulness, it's a shamatha practice. And then we can do this practice as long as we can maintain some alertness. So that may be just a couple of minutes, maybe 10, 15 minutes. So just simply do that meditation as long as you can maintain some alertness. When you start to get a bit drowsy or sleepy, then simply mentally note, okay, my meditation's finished now, and then move out of that posture into whatever posture you use for sleep. So this is a very good way to transition into sleep. You can let go of any sort of negativity of mind and body, tension, and it's also a shamatha practice and a good way to transition to sleep. So what we're going to do now is a short, maybe 10, 15 minute Shavasana meditation to have a little bit of practice at this. So then you may, if you want to, you can grab another cushion there and just find yourself some space. And maybe we can turn off some of the lights in the ceiling, particularly any that are shining downwards. And also you might like, if you want, to have some little cushion on the back of your head. You might find that also quite comfortable. And also, if you're doing this meditation at home and the room is quite cool, it's also sometimes helpful to put a little shawl over your body, although I think it's fairly warm here. But that's another thing you can do if you find you a little bit cool, particularly if you're lying on the floor that's quite cool. So as always, we begin by preparing the body. So here, of course, it's very easy to keep the back nice and straight, and also quite easy to keep the body completely relaxed. So again, just having the feet slightly apart, the hands a little bit away from the body and with the palms facing upwards. And then letting go of any external distractions. Simply allow your awareness to descend into the body. Becoming aware of sensations throughout the body. In particular, noticing the sensations of where your body is touching the cushion or the floor. And using the out-breath to relax and release any tightness or tension in any part of the body. And again, bringing your awareness to the area of the face, and soften and relax all the muscles in the face. All the muscles around the eyes, soft and relaxed. And relaxing more deeply with every out breath. And simply allowing the breathing to settle into its natural rhythm, flowing naturally and effortlessly. And with each out breath, letting go of any thoughts that may have arisen, happily releasing them. In particular, releasing any negativities or agitation in the mind. Simply keep releasing and happily letting go of any thoughts that may arise. And simply grounding yourself in the present moment. Simply becoming aware of sensations throughout the body associated with the breath. And maintaining an ongoing flow of mindfulness of the sensations of the breath throughout the body, throughout the entire cycle of each in and out breath. If you've gotten caught up in distractions, again, remember the first thing to do is simply relax, release the distraction, and very gently return to focusing on the breath. So relax, release, and return. And then in your own time, you can slowly roll over onto your right side and stay there for a short time. And then when you're ready, you can use your hands to help you to sit again upright. So that's it for this evening. So have a nice evening and see you tomorrow at 10 o'clock.
For tomorrow, we'll be having lunch. If you'd like to stay in the center, you're welcome to bring some food. If you make a little bit extra, then it's something that we can all share. So it's kind of a potluck buffet. It's a way that we can stay in the building, keep the energy, keep the silence. We don't have to engage in the outer world